Hello. Welcome to episode 16 of the Tea with Jamie podcast. It is Monday, May 11th. And today I'd like to talk about the MTC, the McLaren Technology Centre. Now, why am I bringing this up? Well, I saw reports this weekend that McLaren bought it back. They had to sell it, I believe, in 2021 during COVID. They were a little short on funds and they had to sell it off. Meant they could reinvest back into McLaren. They leased the building back. And now, reportedly, they're buying it back. So it's back in their hands. So this gives me a good opportunity to go into this building and how in many ways it mirrors the rise and fall of McLaren as a Formula One team. So to give you some context for what this place is, let's talk about the MTC real quick, as it is right now. So this is really primarily focused on Formula One. All the build of the car, the design of the car, the development, the wind tunnel, it's all in the MTC. This is that building you've probably seen. Actually, you've probably seen it in movies and TV shows. It's used a lot for filming because it's just such a spectacular building. But it's that one with the long driveway around the lake, and it's got that beautiful glass-fronted facade with all the cars in the sort of lobby type area. You've probably seen it. If not, just do a Google search. It's an amazing building. But anyway, it's the center of operations for Formula One. It also was central to Formula E when they were competing in that series, and other categories too. IndyCar, of course. But primarily it's Formula One these days. Now, of course, they have the road car division too. That started out in the MTC, but then when was that? Mid-2010, something like that? Let's have a look. 2011, they opened a new production facility, the MPC. You can guess what that stands for, McLaren Production Centre, just for the road cars. And that's right next door. It's basically this big industrial factory for creating all of their super and hypercars. So anyway, that's what this place is. You see it a lot in McLaren social media. So how and why did it come about? Well, let's go back to the beginning of McLaren real quick. So Bruce McLaren was a Kiwi driver back in the 50s, a hugely talented driver, but also an engineer. And he quickly started developing his own cars, building his own cars, and founded Bruce McLaren Motor Racing in the early 60s. There was a small team, built their own cars, raced them, and finally entered Formula One in 1966. Now, being a driver-engineer, he understood how to develop the cars from both perspectives, both as the driver, what the driver would want, but also the mechanics and what is actually possible, and how to get the most out of both sides of it. So they grew in Formula One, in Can-Am, they raced in the Indy 500. However, at just 32 years old, Bruce McLaren was killed at Goodwood Circuit, previously mentioned on the pod, funnily enough. So it was a real tragedy. Such a young age, 32 years old, and such a prodigy, could have gone on to some incredible things. So it went through various organizational, structural changes, various owners and managers, developed the team, and did well. In the 70s, Emerson Fittipaldi won the title in 74. James Hunt won the title in 76 against Niki Lauda. But they started to dip. They started to go downhill. And that, at the end of the 70s, the early 80s, is when a chap called Ron Dennis came in. Now, if you've been around Formula One a while, you will have heard of this guy's name. So Ron Dennis was running a Formula 2 team at the time, which merged with McLaren F1. And this merging was the effective birth of the modern McLaren era. And Ron Dennis was known for his discipline, his obsessive organization, his commercial savvy, and was much more of a sort of corporate guy than a lot of the team owners and managers in the paddock. And he brought those qualities to this team. So he started leaning into getting and managing and attracting greater quality sponsors, which brought in money, which meant that could go into R&D and engineering and the facilities. And he had a sort of ruthless standard that everyone had to raise their game to meet. And it quickly saw results. In the 80s and 90s, drivers like Niki Lauda, Alain Prost, and of course Ayrton Senna, along with their partnership with Honda, ensured multiple world championships. This was a massively successful era, and Ron Dennis, quite rightly, is one of the greats in the history of the McLaren team. And this success led to them starting construction on the MTC. So during this time in the 80s and 90s, when they were having all this success, the McLaren team operated from somewhat of a conventional industrial facility in Woking, in Surrey, in the UK. And while it was successful, Ron Dennis didn't like the way it was organised. It was fragmented and didn't have that slick, clean, machine-like quality that he was really striving for. So his plan was to build his dream facility, which ended up, of course, being the MTC. So they proposed this in the mid-90s, and eventually, with the help of the British government, who approved it in 97, they began construction in 1998. And it was designed by Norman Foster, incredibly famous architect, you know his buildings. And the intention was to build not only an incredibly professional outfit that would produce these great cars, but was also there to inspire everyone who worked there to do their best work to build these great cars. And that was down to the visual aesthetics of it, but also the insane practicality, the cleanliness. And this was all taken on board by Norman Foster and Partners. And it cost a reported £300 million at the time, which was, and still is, a lot of money, of course. But at the time, in the late 90s, that was astronomical by Formula One standards. So they created this building with a huge curved glass facade, the big artificial lake in front of the building, polished interiors, this insane level of cleanliness and natural light that just made the environment so inspiring for everyone that worked in there. Now, the lakes weren't there just for aesthetic reasons. They were actually part of the cooling system for the building and also the wind tunnel. Ron Dennis wanted a calm, almost library quality, apparently. And it has the sort of vibe of like the Apple campus or like some kind of museum, rather than some dusty, grimy, oily team garage. So it finally opened in 2004, and it was inaugurated by Queen Elizabeth II, and it was perfectly matched, or the result of, or was resulting in this incredible era for McLaren. This was the silver Vodafone era McLaren of Lewis Hamilton winning his first championships, incredible sponsorship, the growth of Formula One, drivers' championships, constructors' championships, and seemingly endless success. But, as we know, success is never endless. And Ron Dennis's obsessive level of detail and perfectionism began to stifle people. And what actually brought them great success became a bit of a growing issue. And so after the whole Spygate scandal happened in 2007, and as I mentioned in the previous episode, I'm going to go into that in a separate episode, so you can look into that or just wait for that episode to come out. And this dominant era with Mercedes started to slip. The 2010s became turbulent. Lewis Hamilton scarpered off to the Mercedes team, and this union with Honda again was an absolute unmitigated disaster. So this was a complete disaster for McLaren as a whole, and of course, Ron Dennis being at the helm, he took a huge hit. So after the public embarrassment of just the unreliability of the car, Fernando Alonso calling it a GP2 engine on the radio, morale taking a nosedive, in 2016, the McLaren shareholders forced Dennis out. So this effectively ended the sort of Ron Dennis era in 2016. So 10 years ago, as we speak. Now this is when we enter the modern McLaren era and Zak Brown comes in. So he came in as executive director before becoming CEO of McLaren Racing. This is the racing side of McLaren, just to be clear. And at the time, of course, the car was underperforming. They had so few sponsors, it looked like a blank car. It was really weird to see, actually. Morale was terrible. The culture was all over the place. Honda was a disaster. And Zak Brown kind of came in how Ron Dennis came in, as a breath of fresh air. He was also a corporate guy, but really wasn't an engineer in terms of his influence, at least. He was all about the money and the sponsors and bringing the sort of corporate side up to spec so that they would have the ability to hire the best people, get the best facilities, develop the technology with the right technology, with the right tools and all of the infrastructure to actually become a championship winning team once again. He allowed people more independence. The rigidity of the Ron Dennis era withered away. And in this beautiful, fantastic building that Ron Dennis created, they now had a company culture and the money flowing back in to start to rebuild the company. However, then came COVID, and the McLaren Group as a whole was hit really hard. Road car sales dropped, racing income, because they hadn't recovered yet, was very uncertain, and cash flow became a real problem. So in 2021, McLaren sold their beloved MTC and leased it back and got in return around £170 million, which, if you remember, is actually a loss because they spent £300 million on it like 18, 17 years earlier. However, this gave them cash flow again. And it kept the company alive, and Zak Brown took a lot of heat for selling the MTC, but it ensured that they could do what we all saw them do over the next few years and go from right at the back of the grid to winning double world championships. So what do they spend the money on? Well, they developed a new wind tunnel, a new simulator, they restructured their technical staff, they improved the infrastructure, they recruited, and they basically revitalized their entire technical organization. And from constant upheaval, they began to stabilize the whole organization. And so in 2023, just a couple of years after this massive restructuring, you started to see them turn it around. So at the beginning of the 23 season, they were pretty hopeless. But halfway through the season, I remember it so clearly. In Austria, one of the cars got this major upgrade. I think it was Lando. I'm sure it was Lando. And the car looked like an entirely different beast. And by Silverstone, I think they both had the upgrade. And then they were both looking incredibly competitive, having been bumbling around at the back for the whole beginning of the season. And so they continued that development, and then of course they won the Constructors' title in 2024, and then won the Constructors by a country mile and the Drivers' title in 2025, and are where we are today with them, albeit having a bit of a dodgy start to 2026, look like a strong contender in 2026 too, even with this huge overhaul and a reset that has happened at the beginning of the year. So buying the MTC back after this resurgence, after all that payback from selling it, really showcases Zak Brown's incredible strategic success from a corporate standpoint, getting probably the most sponsored car on the grid at this point, not only by volume, but by quality, right? And the McLaren racing team has recovered incredibly over the past few years. So starting all the way back with Bruce McLaren in the 50s, entering Formula One in the early 60s, great success in the 70s, Ron Dennis taking it stratospherically into the 80s and the 90s, building the infrastructure to create this incredible racing team with a hub that just delivers in the 2000s, a bit of a dip financially in the late teens and early 20s, and this incredible recovery. The building really signifies the rise and fall of McLaren over the past, almost 20 years at this point, when the MTC was in the picture. So that's why it's significant. And if you're a McLaren fan, I think you're pretty happy to hear that the MTC is back under McLaren ownership, if that is indeed the case. So I thought that was a rather interesting story to hear this weekend, that they brought it back, and quite a good opportunity to tell the story of the MTC. And yeah, if you are unfamiliar with it, I would go and look up some pictures online, because it is a beautiful building. Let me Google movies it's been. I remember seeing it in Avenue 5, that HBO comedy show. Let's see. Okay, so a couple of things that just came up here. Fast and Furious presents Hobbs and Shaw, Andor, and of course the F1 movie, and a bunch of TV shows too. So you've seen it, whether you realise it or not. Almost definitely you've seen it. So there we go. That's today's episode. A little bit of a behind the scenes of the McLaren Technology Centre. I will be back again tomorrow with news from the previous few days up until time of recording. It's been a few days since I've done a news app. And yeah, we are Monday, May 11th. We don't have anything this coming weekend, but Formula One is back in Canada the weekend after. So we can say Formula One is back next week. How exciting. And then we're hopefully into a regular Formula One season until the summer break. But then after the summer break, who knows, there might be an extra race. So, we still might be getting a little extra present for the remainder of the season. So anyway, thanks for listening. I will be back again tomorrow, and have a great day. Bye-bye for now. I've been your host, Jamie Muffett. You can find me on social media for more of this rambling nonsense under my name or F1_Jamie. This is an RPS audio production.